Alright everybody, so I thought I would switch it up and instead give you guys a bonus video on solving puzzles. And I guess this is going to wind up being more instructional than entertaining, so it'll be a little bit out of the spirit of a bonus video. But yeah, let's do it. So the idea is that, you might get like a better understanding of how to be more efficient at solving chess puzzles and recognizing those same situations in games. All right, so I'm trying to kind of dig into my own brain and figure out how I see this stuff. A lot of it is just pattern recognition. So you see the same sorts of combinations, the same sorts of themes, the same sorts of patterns over and over again. And you can recognize them very quickly. So, the first thing I noticed almost immediately was this queen and bishop battery and pointing towards the king side. Like if I were to go a little slower, I guess the very first thing I noticed was this rook. And I immediately realized there was no tactics involving winning the rook. And then if I look at the rest of my pieces, like even though the bishops are what we call en prise, like they're both attacking one another, I can just tell there's no tactics here. I can just see that there's no follow-ups. There's nowhere for my knight to go. That's safe. And this rook has nothing to do with it. These pawns have nothing to do with it. So even if you didn't immediately see the answer, you could just kind of rule out the most obvious things first. And then I would know, okay, there's got to be something with this queen and bishop. And sure enough, there is. Checkmate. Okay, bear with me, by the way. This is the first time I've ever done a puzzles video, so I'm still new at this. So one of the first things I notice here is that the queen is threatening this knight. Could take it for free. And I'm just wondering if there's a checkmate. And I don't think there is. So I'm going to take it. So I saw there was a good move. I saw I could take the knight for free and that it would be check and that it was forced. In other words, white had no ability to get out of it. I saw all that. But before I made the move, I double checked to see if there was a checkmate scenario, because that would have been a better solution. Okay, here when I saw the queen take the rook, my first thought in my brain was, is there a way to trap the queen? A lot of times when the queen goes for this rook or starts to go in the corner like this, there's a tricky way. If you have enough pieces defending one another, you can often trap the queen. So that's the first thing I looked at. And I immediately saw there was no way to trap the queen. No matter where my knight goes, the queen can escape very easily. This bishop obviously has nothing to do with it. This knight has nothing to do with it. So then I paid attention to the queen and the rook, and they're both targeting this pawn. So I'm going to take here, check. Checkmate. Okay, let's see. So one of the first things, so I'm immediately looking for checkmate. I also looked at moving my rook to c1 to pin the queen and the king, but you can't do that. The queen will just recapture, and then other than this block on f1, the black would get checkmate. So that's not it. Doesn't look like this bishop has anything to do with it, so all that leaves is the queen and rook working together to come down here for checkmate actually. Okay, so it's not my two bishops. They definitely are not going to have anything to do with this, I can tell. The queen's all by her lonesome, and it's definitely not going to be her all by herself, and so that just leaves the knight coming here for checkmate. Okay, so I only have two main pieces. And the only other piece really worth considering is this pawn. because that's the only other forcing move. Check right here. So now I'm just looking. So first, in this situation, I'm looking for checks. That's the first thing I'm looking for. And I can kind of tell that that check is going to be the only way that is going to be the answer to this puzzle. Now the next step is going to be another check. And then when the king comes, because you always, in tactics especially, a tactic by definition is a forcing set of moves. If your opponent has a way to defend it, it's not a tactic. If they have a way to get out of it, it's not a tactic. So checks are the most forcing moves in chess. So it's always good to look for those first. So here I could retake with the knight, then black would checkmate me on g2 with the queen, because my knight is protecting g2 right now. And so I know it's the pawn. And then when the king comes to h4, my queen's going to slide over. Okay, so never mind. I thought the king was going to slide over and be checkmate, but the queen recaptured. So here I just double check to make sure there's no mates. There's not. So I take the queen with the knight. Okay, I immediately recognize that this is a smothered mate situation, where then I can jump in here and deliver checkmate. Again, that's a pattern. And also, like, the thing is, the reason why these problems are not very hard at this stage is because there's not a lot of pieces, there's not a lot of possibilities. Like, I could tell it's not the queen, I could tell it's not the rook, it's not the pawn, it's not the king. So the only piece I'm looking at is the knight. So it's not, the knight only has 5 legal moves. So there's really only 5 moves to consider. And some of those moves are ridiculous. Like the knight's not going to move back. It's not going to sacrifice this pawn. Maybe it would sacrifice this pawn in another puzzle. But so there's really only 3 moves to even remotely consider. Okay, so I immediately recognize that the queen and the bishop are targeting this knight right in front of the king. Checkmate. Okay, So one of the first things I looked at even before they moved the bishop, I saw if the bishop wasn't here, rook a8 would be checkmate, because the bishop is cutting off the king's escape and he's blocked by his own rook. So that's the first thing I notice. So my first idea was to take the bishop with the knight. And I know, but that doesn't work because the rook recaptures and then there's escape square for the king. All right, I think I found it. Check. And now knight here is checkmate. Right, because knight here I lose a piece. Knight here does nothing. Knight here is check, and the bishop is pinned by the rook. So that's checkmate. So I didn't see that one right away, but I saw the general idea. I saw that bishop and that rook were coordinated, meaning working together in such a way that there was a mating net. And so I started looking for mating possibilities or a possibility to win material. Like there was no winning material possibility, so I looked for the mate. This one is pretty obvious. Queen here is checkmate. King is blocking off the escape, and yeah, that's all there is to it. Again, there's only 4 pieces on the board, and I know it's not going to be the 3 pawns, so that leaves the queen, you know? So you can see when you start thinking about puzzles this way and you start thinking about chess this way, when you start getting better at narrowing down the number of moves you consider, it becomes a lot easier to find good moves and find tactics and solve puzzles. Here, all my pieces are undeveloped, basically. The bishop's all by itself. There's no tactics here. So I know it's just taking this bishop. See how I'm not really looking at every move? I'm able to quickly get rid of a lot of moves. Okay, here... What do we got going on here? So obviously one of the threats is him getting this queen. But I wonder if there's checkmating threats here. I think there is. Yeah, there is. So I could tell, like, okay, I'm not going to win any of this material. I doubt the solution is to stop this pawn, even if that were possible, which I don't think it is. So then I looked at the king. The solution is not to race my pawns down the board. So then I looked at the king and realized there was a mating net. And I started to look at the escape squares. Okay, well, the black king could escape here. Then I found this. Checkmate. Alright, so immediately the first thing I see is bishop and the queen are targeting f2, which would be checkmate, except for the fact that the knight is defending the pawn. Right? And the only other piece that could be involved is the bishop. So I remove the defender, and then if g takes h3, queen takes f2 checkmate. So it would be a mistake for white to take this pawn. Yeah. All right. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully this will help you narrow down the number of choices you consider when you're looking at a chessboard. It'll also hopefully inspire you to recognize the value of tactical recognition, getting better at being able to recognize tactical patterns. All right. Have a great spring break, guys.